Hello. So you may have come across a Salesforce error if you try to access Workbench in a workplace or corporate environment, which you know is a tool that Salesforce developers use to interact with Salesforce APIs. So let's take a look at it. So if you are accessing Salesforce Workbench, right, you would basically look it up. I just put Salesforce Workbench, click it. I am using a developer edition org, so that would always be production, right? Like if you're using a regular sandbox, that's fine, something that your corporate or your work environment provides you. But if you're doing development in your own personal developer org, then you have to select production. So doing so, and I'm gonna try logging in, and it's gonna prompt me to provide login. So I'm gonna quickly try doing that. And what it's going to do, it's going to say an error has occurred and you have been logged out. Invalid grant, IP restricted. And it comes fairly quickly and it brings you back. So, there's two ways that I address this. Doing it, one is IP address whitelisting. The second is my domain policy. This right here should address the issue majority of the times, and in the event it doesn't do so, then you can potentially look at that. So let's walk through this IP address whitelisting. So what's happening is when you access Workbench, right, you're trying to authenticate, and what Workbench is doing is it's trying to reach out to your Salesforce org using its own IP, and that IP is not whitelisted, or it doesn't. That's what it appears to be. So what I'm going to do is quickly log into my developer org. And anytime you get, any type of login issues, you're not able to log in, the first thing I always do is take a look at the login history. And in doing so, I can take a look at it, right? Like you can see, here's a restricted IP. This was kind of similar to what we saw in the error itself. So it looks like Workbench is trying to enter or trying to authenticate using an IP range. An IP address similar to it. So I want to copy this, but at the same time, right, like I did this a little bit earlier also, and there's, as you can tell, each of the restricted IPs that you see, it looks like a similar IP address, but it looks like, right, like it's a different variation of it. So it varies. So what I'm going to do now is look up the user. So in this case, right, if like I know what my user, my user profile is. My user profile is system administrator. So I'm gonna, and then that's the user I'm using to authenticate, right? So I'm gonna pull up my system administrator profile, and profiles have a section or called login IP ranges, and this is basically a range of IP addresses that are whitelisted to be able to log into the Salesforce org. Corporate or larger companies or even smaller companies, right? For security purposes, they may want to limit folks that are logging in down to a few, a certain set of IP addresses. So in this case, and for display purposes, right? Like I've listed this IP, and only from this IP is where I can log in. Anybody else that tries to log in is not going to be able to do so. But I need to be able to use Workbench. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create, hit new, and I'm going to basically put the same IP address. Now I know it varied a little bit, right? Like there were some variations and things like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put a range from the beginning. It's a big range, but it allows me a lot of going back and forth, because if the other option is you put those IP addresses one at a time, and if you're lucky, it's going to use the same IP address and you're able to log in. But in this case, it's obvious that it's trying to authenticate from the 35 onward. So IP, each of the numbers goes from 1 to 255. I just picked from the smallest to the largest, as long as it's within this. It starts with the 35. It's a big range. I understand that. I'm also going to give it a description so I can remove it, or at least know why I put this IP range. So I'm going to hit save. And now if I look at the profile again, system admin, it says basically that, hey, allow anybody on these IP addresses anywhere from 35.1.1.1 to 35.255.255.255, and that's for Workbench. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to try authenticating again. And there you go. I am logged in, and I can use Workbench as a tool to do for various things that Workbench allows me to do. So going back again to it, right? Here when I was talking about the solutions, IP address whitelisting, anytime you get IP restricted or things like that, you can basically go to that profile. Now again, your company, your corporate may have a very, a strict policy that, hey, we only want this to be. So as long as you have an approval to do so, you can on your sandbox or so, allow that IP addresses, and you can get that by going to your login history. It's going to show you where the IP restriction was. Put that IP address here, and it should work. And if there's a problem with access, right, like you can always remove it once you're done using Workbench. But again, do get that authorization, because I wouldn't want you to get in trouble. So the second thing I was talking about, so this right here almost always, is able to get through any type of login issues or something. There was a use case one time that did not work. So the second thing you can do is take a look at is my domain policy, and that's pretty straightforward. You just under setup, go to my domain. And here it should talk about, so under routing and policies, you'll see this, right? So, you just gotta make sure that this is not checked. This is basically prevent login from https://login.salesforce.com. So again, this URL right here will say login.salesforce.com if you're using a production instance, or if you're using a developer sandbox. It's always gonna say login. But if you're using a regular sandbox, it should say test.salesforce.com. So if the first approach doesn't work and you're still not able to log in, just make sure that this is unchecked. And in this case, it's unchecked and I'm able to log in. So I did want to show you, the second way to doing so. So that essentially sums it up. If you run into this issue, while accessing Workbench or for any other tool, which requires Salesforce authentication, and you're basically getting something like IP restricted, go the IP address whitelisting route, and that should help you out. That being said, if you have any questions or concerns, please let me know, and I look forward to going over the next lesson. Thank you.